crashed in the mountain and broke his back again.
Ready? Do you want an introduction or no?
Go for it.
And that's how you make $1 million investing in real estate.
Woo!
That gets everyone's attention. All right, it is 5 after, 4 after, Denise. So tonight I'm not teaching, but I will do an introduction. So how many people came for Jason's interview where he talked about being bankrupt, homeless, living in his car down by the river?
Thanks for the reminder.
Exactly. That's the title of the class. How else am I going to describe it? Because we put it in the title. How many people, raise your hands now, how many people were there for that? How many people did not listen to that or see that class? Okay, so if you didn't see it or didn't listen to it, it's on the podcast. It's pretty amazing. And so one of the things that Jason and I were talking about this, about improving your credit and how much your credit actually impacts how good of a deal a property is. And so Jason was kind of telling me some stuff about it. And I said, hey, do you want to teach a class on that? And he said he did. So that's why we're here tonight. So Jason has decided he's going to teach us better credit for better deals, improving your credit score.
So I bamboozled myself.
You did. You did. And it didn't take much for me to not have to teach tonight. So, and Brian is not able to teach in Q4, although you're teaching in like 2 weeks. You are. You'll see it on the schedule here in a second. So, yeah. So if you want to get started, then I appreciate you teaching. Thank you very much. And I'll jump in here when we do the schedule right now. So
here's the schedule.
Yep, this is the schedule. So I've had several clients ask me before, how do you compare different lenders' rate sheets, and how do you look at different lenders' fees when all the fees are different and things of that nature? And so we've never had a class on that before, so I am going to be teaching a class on how to evaluate mortgages and compare lenders. That will be next week. I started doing some emails this evening right before I came to class, emailed a couple different lenders to find out like what different lenders send over as their standard, here are the rates sort of thing. And so I'm trying to compare those for you, and then I'll pass out some sheets that Tammy and I got recently when we bought some properties, and we'll walk through how to evaluate the mortgages and how to compare different lenders and different fees and stuff like that. Is anyone excited about that class, or should we take it off the calendar? Okay, people are very excited. We're not doing commercial loans. Are you still excited?
I'm still excited.
Okay, still moderately excited now that we're not doing commercial loans. Okay, so that's the upcoming class for next week. The week after that, I'm not allowed to say that Tammy is teaching this. It is real estate appraisals for real estate investors. Apparently, I am teaching it, although it's going to look an awful lot like Tammy teaching it. She's busy checking people in. Yes, because she's the one that's knowledgeable. She goes and researches it and looks at it all. Yes, and so I will stand up in front of the room and I will talk to you about different appraisals. My thought is for that class is not everyone sees appraisals, right? Not everyone sees those. And so I'm going to walk you through what a typical appraisal looks like, show you the different sections, show you some things you can find on there. And then one of the things we're going to do is Tammy said she's going to take some time and go through and just show us ranges of what type of adjustments we've seen looking at a bunch of appraisals for a bunch of different clients. So we'll go show you, as an example, what type of adjustments per square foot people are doing for basements or for a garage space or things like that. And so you'll get a feel for what different appraisers make adjustments for and how much the difference is there. So is anyone excited about that class? Yeah, that's what I thought. So that's another class we have not done. I'm trying to do like every class we've never done before. So this is why you're starting to see some new classes coming in and trying to just do stuff that's never been on the calendar before, which is pain in the butt for me, but good for you. And then Thanksgiving. So Thanksgiving week counts as me teaching.
Are you cooking a turkey? Then it doesn't count.
I am not cooking a turkey. I think you know the answer to whether or not I'm cooking a turkey. I am not cooking a turkey, but it does count as me teaching the class. So yeah, that'll be Wednesday, November 27th. I'm teaching that day, so that'll all be there. And then this is the class that I told you is coming up. It's the Insiders, and I'm not sure if that... Insiders, yeah, I guess it is possessive. The Insider's Secret to Real Estate Investing Philosophies.
That means it's one insider. It's kind of weird. So it must be just you.
Yeah, okay. Well, anyway. It says mostly Brian, with some James as the who's teaching it. So this was intended to be a class where we get together, and so Brian and I have these, and I don't know if I'm going off topic. You have definitely a full class tonight. But sometimes Brian and I will get on the phone, and 2 hours later, we realized we probably should have recorded some of this stuff because it's like really, really good stuff for some people. Well, yeah, I mean, like really nuanced, crazy stuff. So, but this is going to be like that, but on real estate investing philosophies, and so we'll have some good interchange, I think, on that. And it's low prep and right around Christmas, so Brian can not do a lot of prep in Q4. Is that fair?
The next one definitely does not count as you. I'll give you Thanksgiving, but the next one is not counting.
Yeah. Okay. So the Encrate Christmas networking party is on December 11th this year, and Brian is right. It really shouldn't be me teaching because all I did, and those who don't know, I really am an introvert. It doesn't seem like this in front of the room, but like get me in like the Christmas party, and you really see it. I will go off on my own in the corner. I will eat my fajitas and drink my beverage with Beth. Yeah, with Brian's Beth. And then Brian is out like just mingling with everybody and being super social, and I'm just like in my own little cave, happy as can be in my own little cave. So yeah, that probably shouldn't count as me, although it does count as me teaching. So that is December 11th. Any questions on upcoming classes? Next slide.
I have a question.
Oh, wait, question.
What do you do for a living?
What do I do for a living? Yeah, thank you very much for that setup. I help people buy and sell houses. I'm a real estate broker. And I definitely appreciate it. Daryl gives me a hard time all the time because he says, I teach these classes and I never tell people that I'm a real estate broker. And so thank you for setting me up with the alley-oop there. I definitely appreciate that. Okay. All right, so we'll do introductions. So who are you? I'm James Orr. I'm a real estate broker. I help people buy and sell houses. When was the last time you checked your credit score? I actually checked it right before I came to class because I was sending out the email and I wanted to tell the lenders what my credit score was for doing that. So I'll pass the mic around.
My name is Matt Weaver, and the last I checked was like 4 or 5 months ago, just because I was curious. So, yeah.
My name is Alex. The last time I checked my credit score was probably 2 weeks ago.
I'm Doug Schwind, and last time I checked my credit score was about 3 hours ago.
Whoa. I'm Dan Smith. I checked 3 weeks ago.
I'm James Johnson. I check mine constantly. I check mine through Wells Fargo app, Mint, all those. Every time it pops up, I check it.
I'm Michael Corbin, and I checked mine yesterday.
Dana Freeman, similar. I have a lot of apps that show it on a regular basis.
My name's Lance. Check it all the time, like they said.
I don't think we need to do the class then.
Daryl Stolte, 9 months ago.
Oh, okay.
Laura Idy, I check mine all the time. Checked it yesterday, last time.
John Molinario, 3 days ago, once a month.
Good.
I'm Lynn McCrae, and I checked it about a year ago.
Hi, I'm Roberta Knoll, and I checked it at 4:30.
I'm Denise Malal. I don't know, maybe 60 days ago, last time I bought a house.
There you go.
Good.
I'm Austin, and about 5 or 6 months ago.
Yeah, it depends if you mean like looking at an estimation or actually pulling a credit report. But
This is his question. Don't look at
Yeah, it's not, yeah.
yeah, I would say a few times a month if you're looking at like an estimate, but August was the last time we actually pulled it.
My name is Grace, probably last month.
Cool.
I'm Kevin Smith, and a couple months ago.
Brian Williams. I haven't checked it in a while. I have credit monitoring service, so if something bad hits my credit, I know that instantly. But credit report probably really pulled last time was like February.
Wow.
I'm Royce Quintana. What's a credit score?
Oh boy. The class is for you then.
I'm Flash. I got a letter in the mail today with my credit score from the bank.
I'm Kyle. I check it every day.
My name's Ryan Flynn. I got Credit Karma notice today that my credit is dropping. So.
Oh.
Christina Harding. Yeah, I check it on Credit Karma a lot, but I don't know if that's where you should be checking it.
I'm a nice guy, and I checked it last week.
Kathleen, I don't know. Usually comes up on different credit card, things like that. So I don't know, a couple weeks ago.
I'm Laura, and I check it every day.
I'm Mark, and I checked it yesterday.
My name is Bill. My wife checks hers hourly. I haven't checked mine in months.
My name's Bob, and I haven't checked it in years. Our credit is on lockdown after the Equifax debacle.
We're going to talk about that.
Same thing.
Nick, last week.
Cool. So what am I supposed to do now, James?
Yeah, exactly. Teach class.
Oh, okay, cool. So, do you want to talk about this?
Yeah, there's a podcast. Actually, there is something I should tell you about the podcast. For some reason, heading into the holidays, you guys caught me in a moment of weakness because all of the episodes are up on the podcast right now. So there's like 150 classes up there or something like that. So I would listen to those before they disappear.
Awesome. You're such a good guy, James. And I am not. And I'll tell you why here in a second. So first of all, caveat, I'm not a lawyer. So anything I talk about here tonight should not be construed as legal advice. If you have questions, especially related to bankruptcy stuff, I definitely recommend you talk to a lawyer. Also, I'm an IRS licensed enrolled agent. Professionally, I focus on helping people that owe large sums of money to the IRS. I defend them. That's what I do for a living. But with that said, I'm not all warm and cuddly like James is, so please do not ask me tax questions. Do not chase me down on social media and ask me about stuff on your tax return. I will block you, ignore you, etc. Okay, so I am, just to put that out there. And anybody listening on the podcast. So, why you should care about your credit score. So, as I learned pretty quick when I was getting ready to start nomading that my credit score was very important to how my nomad journey would look, what the numbers would look like, and what kind of deals I could get even longer term once I was doing stuff other than nomad, like 20% down properties. So your loan rate is directly impacted by your credit score. I'm sure you all know that. But there's other things that your credit score impacts that you may not realize. For example, any insurance folks in the room, your credit score can impact what you pay for your homeowner's insurance. Okay? And sure, it may only make $50 or $100 difference a year, but across multiple properties, many years, it adds up. Okay? And also it can have an impact on your nomad plan. How many of you are nomading or interested in nomading or have heard of Nomad? Okay. I'm a Nomad fan. So let's start here. What is FICO? FICO is an algorithm developed by a company called Fair Isaac Company. They actually have 28 different algorithms that they use, and there's different ones for credit card underwriting, auto loan underwriting, mortgage loan underwriting, and everything in between. The purpose of a FICO score is to assess somebody's likelihood of defaulting on a loan. Okay. Right now, the most common of the 28 algorithms is called the FICO 8. It is used in the vast majority of lending decisions. There are other scores like FICO 2, 3, 4 in particular that are used in mortgage underwriting as well. But in my personal opinion, because it's the one used like across the board, I think the one that you should like track is the FICO 8. Okay? Scores range from 300 to 850 for the FICO 8 scoring model. And a score of 800 theoretically indicates less than 1% probability that the borrower, meaning us, is going to default on the loan. Okay? Scores less than 500 statistically indicate up to an 89% probability of default. Okay? And 600 is roughly the middle mark.
Hey, do you happen to have a curve for that, like an actual probability curve?
If you pull your credit score from, I think it's Experian directly, they give you the curve.
Okay, thanks.
Yep. There's a competing score out there because the FICO algorithm is licensed to lenders and they have to pay money to use it. And so Experian, TransUnion, and Equifax, they got together a bunch of years ago and said, hey, we're going to create our own scoring thing. It's called Vantage Score. The current version is 3. Vantage Score is what you're going to get from a lot of like the free credit monitoring things. Understand that a Vantage Score is not a FICO score. They are different. The FICO score is used in over 90% of lending decisions. Okay? If you are not on track, if you're not immediately looking to do any transactions, apply for new credit, buy a house, that sort of thing, then I think that tracking your Vantage score is okay. But if you are like preparing yourself intentionally to set yourself up to purchase a property or buy a car, something like that, I encourage you to actually check and track your actual FICO score because it's the score that will actually be used, and then you're not going to be surprised by it. So make sure it's a FICO, not a FACO, is what we often say. So this is what kind of the range of the population of scores looks like. About 20% of Americans have an exceptional score of 800 to 850. Only 16% of folks have a bottom score. The national average is 701. And that's data from Experian and their massive database. So what goes into your FICO score? So it is based on a number of factors. Understand that this is a proprietary trade secret algorithm. They don't tell us exactly what goes into it and exactly what different factors get you so many points. Okay, they don't tell us that. But in general, they will tell us kind of how the breakdown works. The single biggest piece is payment history. Again, remember your FICO score is all about trying to assess whether or not you're going to default on a loan. Okay, and so your payment history, it makes sense that would be the number one thing that they're going to look at. The second biggest component, 30%, is the amount of your outstanding debt. When it comes to your FICO scores, having debt in and of itself is not a bad thing. Okay, you can have millions and millions of dollars in debt and still have a great FICO score. Okay, it's how you've paid on that debt, the percentage of the debt left over compared to the original balance. So like the more you pay down, the better it looks, and the structure of that debt. If it's all credit cards, bad. Okay, and that is where the credit mix little component also comes in. FICO wants to see a mixture of revolving credit lines, so credit cards and lines of credit, as well as installment loans, so student loans, car loans, mortgages. That plays into the credit mix part, but it's also part of the outstanding debt component. Length of credit history. If you have a credit history of 2 days, then you're going to have a crappy score. Okay? If you have a credit history of 30, 40 years, theoretically, there's more stuff there to evaluate you on, longer time period to evaluate against. And so they consider it better to have a longer history.
And do they put more weight, do you know if they put more weight on average length of credit versus actual duration?
We're actually going to get there. There's this whole conversation to be had about average age of accounts and age of oldest account. Okay, so for example, I'll tell you why I still have not closed the crappy Capital One card that I got right after my bankruptcy was discharged. Okay, it plays directly into that. And then pursuit of new credit, which you're probably more used to being called hard inquiries. So whenever you apply for credit, you get dinged a little bit. Okay, now here's the thing: if you're doing Nomad, you're going to pretty much constantly have 2 or more inquiries on your credit report always, because this pursuit of new credit is based on a rolling 24-month window. Okay, so if you're doing Nomad, you're always going to have hard inquiries, always. Okay, and in the pursuit of science, in preparation for this class, I submitted about 6 credit applications yesterday, and
not recommended, by the way.
Don't do that. Okay, At the end of the class, I'll show you the impact that it had on my score overnight, okay? From Monday to when I checked my scores this morning, okay? Yeah, do not do that. But understand that just having inquiries on there, period, is not a bad thing, all right? You'll read some blogs and stuff about credit report stuff that says that you should be gardening forever, meaning don't apply for any credit ever if you want to maximize your score. Credit is a tool. Your credit score is a tool. And I firmly believe that it's a powerful wealth building tool, okay? Just like your job, savings in the bank, mortgage programs, they're all tools to achieve some objective. So if you're just going to let that tool sit on the shelf, you might as well not have it at all, okay? So don't be afraid of having debt. Don't be afraid of having recent credit inquiries. It's a good thing as long as you're doing it intelligently, obviously.
Not like you did earlier.
Not like I did. And I'll tell you about how I screwed up even after my bankruptcy, okay? And yeah, fun stuff. So some kind of quick tips. If you don't already know about this, under federal law, you're entitled to a copy of your credit report from every bureau once a year. So annualcreditreport.com is the free credit report site. Make sure you're on the right site. You all know that we live in an era of like phishing and cyber security somethings. So make sure you're on the right site, not the .net, the .org, the .biz, the .info, whatever. Annualcreditreport.com. Make sure that the Experian, Equifax, TransUnion logos are there. I'm sure there's other engineering IT people that can talk more intelligently about the security part. But since you can pull one report per year from each bureau, and I highly suggest that you monitor continuously, just pull one every 4 months. It's the easiest way to do it. Note that when you pull your report here, it doesn't give you your score. It only gives you the report, okay? Some of the monitoring services that some of you mentioned during the intros will only give you your score. So you have a source for your score, but you also need a source for the report, okay? Don't ignore the report at the exclusion of the score or vice versa, okay? You want to be looking at both. If you are denied credit, you are also legally entitled to a copy of your credit report. You'll get a denial letter from the bank or other financial institution with instructions on how to access a copy of your report. Most of the time, you can do it online.
Is it the same as the annualcreditreport.com thing, or is it different?
It's directly through the whatever credit bureau that bank used to make the credit decision.
And does that count as your one per year?
It does not.
Oh.
Okay, you still get your one per year. Okay, so that's how you get your report. As several of you already mentioned, you already track your score through either a bank or a credit card or a free service of one form or another, okay? What I want to implore upon you is to understand what score model you're being given, okay? A lot of them of the free tools, they use that Vantage score, which is not a FICO score, okay? And like I already said, for general like tracking purposes, it's fine. But if you are actually like in property acquisition mode, I highly encourage you to be tracking your actual real legitimate FICO scores. So some examples of just some of the ones that I look at all the time. So Wells Fargo, they bought a couple of my mortgages. So I have a thing with them. And when I log in, it has the little button there, check your score. And I think it's once a month that it updates. They use the FICO 9, which is the most modern scoring model from FICO, based on your Experian credit report. Okay? Discover has a service. You don't even need to be a Discover card holder. You can sign up for the service for free. They'll give you your FICO 8 based on your TransUnion score. Okay? Experian has a service called CreditWorks Basic. You have to jump through several screens of upsells to their paid product before they'll let you have it. but they will also give you a free FICO 8 plus free email alerts. Okay? And it's a free service. American Express does Experian FICO 8. Citibank is one of the few that provides an Equifax score. So if you already have a banking relationship with Citibank, you can get access to your Equifax. And then there's obviously a billion other banks.
Question.
Yeah, I'm not used to the microphone part.
Do you see a lot of difference in the value you'll get between the FICO 9 and the FICO 8?
Yes, because they're different scoring models. They take different things into account. That's why great question. When you're tracking your score, that's why you want to make sure that you're comparing apples to apples, right? Okay. If you're trending it over time. And because the FICO 8 is the one most commonly used in actual credit decisions, it's the one I recommend tracking. Okay? Also, understand that because of different things that will be on, if you look at all three of your credit reports, they're hardly ever identical. There's going to be slight differences on them. And so the score is going to be different across each of your three reports. Okay? That's why if you're in property acquisition mode, I highly recommend that you track all three. Okay? TransUnion, Equifax, Experian. Either through these free services or be willing to fork out a few shekels to actually subscribe to a service. Okay. Free monitoring versus paid. I already talked about Credit Karma. Several of you say you use it. Credit Karma is good because it gives you both I think it's your TransUnion and your Experian, I think. It gives you both of them, but it gives you your Vantage score, not a FICO score. So again, it's good for general monitoring over time, especially if you're not actually applying for credit. But if you're going to enter credit application mode, switch over to a platform that gives you your real FICO scores. Bankrate, about a year ago, I think it was, they bought a company called Quizzle. And Quizzle was one of the few at the time for several years that gave you your actual real FICO score. Now it's a lot more common with the banks. So Bankrate has a free TransUnion FICO 8 score. A couple of you mentioned the Equifax breach. So some people may wonder if they were a victim of the Equifax breach. Raise your hand if you have a pulse. You were a victim of the Equifax breach. Okay. The class action lawsuit settlement from that was agreed to, let's say it was 3 or 4 months ago. And they give you a bunch of different options for how you can make a claim. What the Federal Trade Commission is recommending everybody do is sign up for the free credit monitoring. Okay? So if you go to equifaxbreachsettlement.com, you can sign up for 1 year of 3 bureau monitoring. Equifax is required to pay for also to access your TransUnion and your Experian info. And then they have an optional extra 6 years of Equifax only. So I actually signed up for this today. Again, as putting this together. So I know that it's kind of maybe awkward giving your personal information to the company that breached your personal information, but they already have it. Yeah, I mean it's already out there. Okay?
So does everyone else at this point.
Correct. Yeah, privacy is dead. Thank you, Internet.
And by the way, for those that are listening to this after today's date is what, November 6th? These things can change all the time.
Correct.
I forget the name of the company of that guy who was like, I will repair your credit. He publicly said his social security number.
LifeLock.
LifeLock.
Yes.
Equifax was giving out people
Correct.
a free option to LifeLock, but they own
Correct.
LifeLock. So it's
Correct.
a bunch of crap.
And don't forget that the CEO of LifeLock that was putting his social security number on all their TV commercials had his identity stolen several hundred times. I'm serious. Yeah. That's why you don't see those ads anymore. Let's see, another good one. This is an Experian product. If it sounds tonight like I'm hawking Experian stuff, I swear I'm not. They just happen to have some decent offers. And again, if you're listening to this on the recording later, these could all change. CreditCheckTotal.com, they have a 7-day $1 offer for all 3 reports, all 3 scores. And as long as you cancel it online within the 7 days, they don't whack you for the $30 a month or whatever it is. Experian CreditWorks Premium is the upsell to the CreditWorks Basic that I mentioned a few minutes ago. That's all 3 scores, all 3 reports, updated every month, $5 for the first month, $25 a month thereafter. And then there's FICO themselves. FICO has a program, several programs, 1 or 3 bureau monitoring. When I got really super serious around 2014 and well through my second Nomad purchase, I was paying the $60 a month for the actual FICO service because I wanted it straight from the source. And I'll show you here in a minute my score trajectory, but I was very, very aggressively working on my credit repair, okay? And so I wanted the daily updates, I wanted it directly from FICO. So do I recommend that for most people? No, it's probably not worth the $60 a month for most of you. But if you're coming from a place of, credit meltdown like I did, and you're aggressively trying to rebuild, it may be worth it, depending on your real estate investing goals in particular. Okay. So the FICO algorithm is a trade secret, but occasionally they give glimpses into their world. So this is from an interesting paper they published a year ago. And I think they wanted to publish the paper just because machine learning is like a buzzword right now, and so it sounds cool or something. And it shows, based on an analysis of millions of credit reports, okay, so FICO has their own algorithm, but their research department used a machine learning tool to data mine scores that were already done rather than mining through their own algorithm or something in order to come up with this. Does that make sense? Okay, I don't know. And remember those factors, credit mix, pursuit of new credit, credit history, outstanding debt, payment history. They wanted to show a relative indication of the impact of different things. So for example, they say if you have no serious delinquency ever reported on your credit report, that's like a 75-point bump theoretically under the FICO 8 model that's giving you. Okay. Similarly, if you only have 1 credit card, you're getting a 25-point bump. But if you have 2 credit cards, you get a 55-point bump. And it maxes out at 3 with a 60-point bump. And when you have 4+ cards, you start losing points. Okay. So this is, when this came out last year, for people that are like dork out about trying to decipher the algorithm, and there's entire communities on the internet that they play with their scores. They do stupid things to play with their score to try to figure out the algorithm. And what this did is it validated a lot of that research done by the kind of the amateur algorithm hunters. So this chart, you can find this all over the internet, but it was interesting if you're really into this stuff. So now I want to talk about what not to do, and then we'll talk about credit repair. So if you really, really want to delve into this, one of the best resources I can recommend to you are the forums on myfico.com. They extremely helpful group of people. I've participated there for years. Pretty much everything I know about credit repair came from the MyFICO forums. And so this was a story from while I was kind of going through my credit repair journey, there was this other dude that was in a going the other direction. He was had recently been discharged from the military, and he was going through a divorce. Him and his wife had a house. Mortgage was $1,200 a month. He had moved somewhere else to go back to college on the GI Bill, and his wife left the state and went somewhere else. So nobody was in this house, and so it was just falling into disrepair, and she wasn't paying anything on it. He was stuck with it. And if any of you have gone back to school, you know, in mid-career or whatever, you notice that your income probably takes a nosedive all of a sudden. So what he did is he said, screw it. I'm just going to let the house go. He couldn't sell it because it was kind of a train wreck, I guess. And he's like, I'm just going to stop paying it. He kept paying all of his other bills. And this is where he started. So his Equifax score was 790. Experian was 814. TransUnion was 829. Okay, ready for the punchline? So 30 days after he stopped paying it, so it's called a 30-day late, it dropped his score by, what is that, 120, 130 points across the board. 1 30-day late. 1. Okay. His score bottomed out at about the 60 and 90-day late point. Okay. And if you notice, I should have given you this to make a chart. That's what I should have done.
Yeah, you should have.
His score actually started going back up after the foreclosure was finalized. Okay. And remember, he kept paying all of his other bills, his credit cards and whatever. He kept paying everything else. So the biggest impact on the score drop came at the 60 and 90-day late point. Okay. After that, it was recovery time. Okay. Is that a surprise to any of you?
He was paying all his other bills, right?
Correct.
Just the only thing he wasn't paying was his mortgage.
Correct. He let the house go and that was it.
Wait. Otherwise, you're going to yell at me because it's not on the podcast.
Did it eventually go into foreclosure, and how did that affect it?
Yes, this is the foreclosure. Okay. And so when the foreclosure was finalized, yeah, this is why I should have put it in a chart. When it reflected a zero balance on the mortgage, his score had actually come back up a few points. Okay. So, and then when he was 6 months past foreclosure, he was actually back up doing pretty well. Because anything above, 680 is pretty good. Yeah. Decent, yeah. So he was already, back in that 680 plus territory for his middle score. 2 years after the foreclosure finalized, he was back in 700 territory. And then this is the update I pulled from him this morning. He updates this on a monthly basis and has been for 5 years on this thread on the FICO forums. That's what I mean by some of the algo nerds that are, trying to figure out how the algorithm works. There's a bunch of people that do this. So right now he has one inquiry posting on his TransUnion and his Experian report. His overall utilization, which we'll talk about in a few minutes, is 1%. His credit cards are all paid off, except one is reporting a balance. I'll talk about why that's important. He has an auto loan that he has paid down to 65% of the original loan balance. I'll talk about why that's important. His oldest account is 12 years old. We'll talk about why that's important. See why I'm telling you the story? Sets the stage. His average age of accounts. So if you take how old all of his open trade lines, his credit cards, loans, etc. are, they average 7 years old and 8 years on Equifax. His age of youngest account, because your youngest account actually can count against you. So his youngest account is 1.5 years old, which is actually pretty good. And so 3 years post foreclosure, his middle score is over 800, 808 for his middle. Okay, and middle score is the most important when you're looking at the mortgage qual, right? Awesome. Okay, are any of you surprised by the 3-year recovery trajectory?
For the recording, he said, yes, that's the only one we use.
Oh, sorry. Yeah, Matt said, yeah, middle score. Okay. So 3 years. All right. So if you've had credit problems in the past and you think that that's going to prevent you from doing real estate investments, wrong. Okay. You just have to kind of grab the bull by the horns and follow a process. So how do you improve your score? I am going to get a little bit personal here on myself. This is my score trajectory. My bankruptcy was discharged on August 30th of 2008. Because I'm a nerd, I checked my own credit score 2 days later. I know you can't really read it. This says 380. Yeah, I had a 380 credit score. I don't know which FICO version it was, and I don't remember which credit bureau I pulled. I didn't think I'd be teaching a class a decade later about it where I'd need that information. But it was a FICO. I do remember that. It was not a Vantage score. And I paid like $20 for it or something like that. So 380. My bankruptcy had not yet posted to my credit reports. So it wasn't yet reflecting, okay, that everything had just gotten flushed. So at 380, I had a couple dozen 120 plus day lates. I had multiple charge-offs, foreclosure, everything bad possible. Okay, nothing was showing as being discharged in bankruptcy yet.
What's the minimum score again?
300.
Okay, so you were 80 above the minimum.
Right. And people on the FICO forums have tried to figure out how to get a minimum, and nobody's figured it out yet. Like, we don't actually know how you get a 300 credit score. Okay. The lowest I've seen reported was 350. And it was a situation very similar to mine, but with a much shorter credit history. They had like a 2-year credit history, whereas I had 10 years, 12 years already at that point. So that's why I was a 380 and not a 350, I guess, is because I just had a longer credit history. You'll notice that there is a straight line going all the way to 2012. That's because I didn't have the data to give to James to make this chart. But I will say that just off memory, in early 2009, I was around probably 430, 440, I think. And then in August of 2009, I bought a vehicle. And Capital One gave me a loan with a credit score of around 480 to buy a Ford Ranger in August of 2009. February of 2010, I was teed by a Ford F-350, and the Ranger did not survive that encounter. And this is when I learned one of my first lessons about credit repair. Okay? And so if you don't already have this and you have a leased or financed vehicle, you need to have something on your insurance called gap coverage. Okay? I did not have gap coverage. So when Geico paid off Capital One, it left a balance of $4,350. So 2 years after my bankruptcy discharged, I had a new charge-off on my credit report because I didn't have gap coverage. Okay.
The alternative is you could have paid that $4,000.
If I had had the money, I could have paid it. Right, but I didn't have the money. Okay. I was still very broke. I was no longer homeless, but I was still very, very broke at that point. As we move along the timeline, you know, between 9 and 12, I started doing some things to clean up my credit. I started traveling overseas extensively in 2012 and realized that the kind of crappy credit rebuilder cards, the secured cards that I had, were killing me overseas because of their transaction fees. And so I'm like, okay, I need to work on my credit so I can get a better credit card with no foreign transaction fees. That became like suddenly important to me. And plus I wanted to start chasing the rewards points. And I just couldn't because I didn't have the credit score. I was like locked out from that universe. And if I was going to spend, several years traveling, that was going to be a bad place for me to be in terms of affordable travel. So in 2012, what I did is I pulled this. And no, you can't actually look at them because it's got too much personal stuff on it. But I started looking through my credit report and seeing what it said about the status of each of my old trade lines, credit cards, things like that. And I started noticing that some of them said included in bankruptcy, included in bankruptcy, included in bankruptcy, charge off. I'm like, wait, no, that was included in my bankruptcy. That was on my petition. Why does it not say included in bankruptcy? And so I'm like, I wonder if that's hurting me. Turns out it was. I filed online disputes with all the bureaus to make sure that everything that should be labeled as included in bankruptcy actually was labeled included in bankruptcy. Okay? When I did that, my score started to suddenly improve. And that's where this chart starts. Okay? When I still have the data when I put this together yesterday. So what is that, about a 17-point bump or so in about a 6-month window, just from making sure that things were coded properly. Okay, so that was kind of step one for me. In around this time, I had, so the main bad things I had besides my bankruptcy record was I had the charge off on the truck, and I had a Verizon wireless account that wasn't mine. I've had my identity theft stolen 2 or 3 times now. One of them was the opening of this Verizon wireless account at the Broadmoor store in Colorado Springs. And wound up with a balance of $323, okay, that I was not responsible for, was not mine. What I did was I did something called a pay for delete. PFD is the acronym you'll see. And again, this is all stuff I learned from the FICO forums, by the way, okay, including the template letter. So I sent this letter, again, template letter directly from the FICO forums, saying this account is not mine. I don't know the account number. I can only show you what's on my credit report. I don't have the full account number because it's not my account. And I said, however, I have future things I want to do. I want to restore my credit. And so I am willing to pay you the $323 to make this disappear, even though it's not mine. Okay? And so I tried several different corporate addresses. Finally, this one in Rancho Cordova, California worked. And the agreement I got back was that I would send a cashier's check for the $323. They would remove it from my credit reports within 10 days. It was worth it to spend that $323 so that 2 years later I could buy a house.
Did you ever get reimbursed for that money?
I did not.
So it was really you just paid someone else's bill.
I paid somebody else's Verizon bill. Why? It was worth it to me in the long term. Okay, and it sucked, but I was no longer broke by this point, you know, and so I could afford to do that, and so I did it because I knew that I wanted to eventually start real estate investing again. Okay, and this was in 2013. So what happened was I paid them the $323. This collection account was deleted from all 3 bureaus. That is this jump right here, from 587 to 623. And by the way, for consistency, where I have the data in my files, I tried to be consistent and use the Experian FICO 8 scores, okay, even though I was tracking all 3. So this is mostly, not all, but mostly Experian scores.
For the recording, if you ever teach this again, send me the data for all of them, and I'll do 3 different lines.
Okay, perfect. Okay.
There's a question in the back.
In your pay for delete letter, did you contact Verizon themselves or the collection
agency? Oh, I had called them dozens of times.
No, but I mean, like, when you're addressing it to them, did you address Verizon or the collection agency?
Verizon.
Okay.
because only the original creditor has the authority to pull it back from the collection agency. Okay, so yeah, I went straight to Verizon, and it took a few months for it to pop off all three bureaus, and one of them I did have to submit an online dispute, and I had to send, I can't remember which one it was, but I had to say it was TransUnion. I had to send them a copy of the Verizon letter back to me saying we were good, and then they removed it. Okay, but that's a pay for delete, PFD. I mention it because it's a tool. Going on through history here. So, I timed this all out, don't worry.
Okay.
In my bankruptcy, there is a misconception. Again, I'm not a lawyer. Talk to your bankruptcy attorney if this is an issue to you. But there's a misconception that you cannot flush student loans in bankruptcy. It is a fallacy. You actually can, even in the post-05 era. But there are just rules to it. Okay. So in my bankruptcy, I was not able to flush my federal student loans, but I was able to flush my private student loans. Okay. I'm not going to go into the process. Talk to your lawyer. So after my bankruptcy discharge, one of my private student loans was turned over to a law firm for collection after my bankruptcy was discharged. Okay. It should have been just deleted. Okay. So I had to go and fight that. And this was April of 2014 is when I was working on this. And what happened was I disputed it with both TransUnion and Equifax. TransUnion, so this is called, the technique is called debt validation, DV. Your credit reports are supposed to be accurate, right? And if they're not accurate, you have the right to dispute that. So my credit report was not accurate. And so I requested that the credit bureaus validate the debt with the creditor. Okay? And so what was interesting is that TransUnion called this Weltman, Weinberg, and Reese and got somebody that said, yep, that was discharged in the bankruptcy through the adversarial proceeding. And TransUnion said, okay, fine, it's gone. Equifax called on a different day or got a different person. And on that different day, they said, no, it wasn't discharged, or we don't care, we're not going to give you an answer. And so Equifax did not delete. What I had to do is send the TransUnion delete record to Equifax so that Equifax would delete it. On Experian, it never showed up. I don't know why. Okay? And so that's called a debt validation, is what that is. And then the last one I'll share with you, this one would have been this jump right, somewhere around right here. Oh, it was the drop and then the bump. So I was living in Port Orchard, Washington, about 50 miles from Seattle. And after I'd come back from Australia and traveling around the United States, having fun, and something showed up on my credit reports. It was two $81 each parking tickets from the city of Seattle. I never went to Seattle because I don't like big cities. So I was never in Seattle. Also, I didn't own a car. But Municipal Court of Seattle says, no, parking tickets, and sent them to a collection agency in Gig Harbor. So I had to chase all this down. It took a couple of days, and then I finally was able to get this letter from the Municipal Court of Seattle saying, yeah, we screwed up. They called off their dogs at the collection agency, and then I had to send this to all three bureaus to get it removed. Okay? Point of telling you this is, things will pop up on your credit report that do not belong to you. They are errors. You need to monitor your reports.
So I have a question. Is this because you have a really common name?
No. My last name is common, but my first name is definitely not. Okay, there's like 4 of us in the country.
With
Okay.
the first name?
Yeah.
So with the first name and last name, there's only you.
That I know of.
Right. That's my point, is that this is not just a common name sort of thing.
Yeah. Yeah. I'm not a Kevin Smith. Is there a Kevin Smith here?
Yes. There you go.
I was just going to say, I'm James Johnson, and
Yeah.
I literally have met 2 people with the same first, middle, and last name, and I've never had any of those things happen to me.
Yeah. There you go.
It happens. So you have to monitor your credit reports. So you can see the trajectory as I was cleaning things up, as I was opening new accounts and trying to be a good little borrower, right? I'll point out that you'll notice that there's this huge score drop. So right here, the 675 to the 647 and back up to the 678, that was the parking thing, okay? The 678 to the 638, that 40-point drop, that was after closing on my first Nomad property. There's a 40-point hit to my credit score.
Which one was it?
The 678 to the 638.
Okay. So really, the 678 is your first Nomad property? This peak?
Yeah. Yeah. And it took a couple of months for it to come back up after they were like, oh, he's actually going to make us payments. Okay. So that was my first Nomad. Second Nomad was right about here. Notice that I didn't have this problem. Why? Because I already had one mortgage, and so they're like, okay, you're good. Okay, the algorithm said, okay, you're fine to add another one. And then, can anybody guess what happened right about here? Can you guess what happened right there? 24 months. Nope.
10 years after bankruptcy.
Booyah. That was my 10-year mark for my Chapter 7 discharge. Chapter 7 stays on your credit reports for 10 years. Chapter 13 is 7 years. Okay?
Did it automatically fall off, or did you have
There's a question here.
Did it automatically fall off, or did you have to bug them to remove it?
Excellent question. So here's what I did not know this. I thought that I was going to have to wait until August 30th, 2018, 10 years from my discharge date. My application date was April 30th, 2008. All 3 bureaus lopped it off at the end of April, automatically. It fell off, and just one day I checked my scores, and I noticed that my scores had skyrocketed, and I was in the 700s again for the first time in a decade. I was like, what happened? I'm like, oh, my BK fell off. Okay. And then I've been doing okay since. The 824 was October 30th. I was at 824. As of this morning, I'm at 798 because I submitted half a dozen applications yesterday for unsecured lines of credit. Okay. So I suffered about a 25-point score drop by adding 6 new inquiries to my credit profile. Okay, and most of those inquiries, most of them pulled Experian. So, yeah. But now I have a bunch of credit I don't need. Okay? So that was my score journey. So I've referenced several things here that I'm now going to backtrack and fill in some details on. Okay, is this helpful?
Can I ask a question about your inquiries?
Only if you use the microphone.
So were those just like credit cards that you applied for or whatnot online?
Yesterday?
Yeah.
Yesterday I applied for a $100,000 unsecured line of credit with Wells Fargo. I applied for a $35,000 unsecured line of credit through another bank. I applied for a $25,000 unsecured line of credit through another bank.
So here's the question.
Too early to know. You got all this credit.
Yeah, right?
Wells Fargo said no. Right. Several of the others said yes.
Nice. So here's the question. Once those accounts get created and they get established, do you see, now that you'll have new accounts that are very young on your credit, it may drop even more? I mean, do you expect it to drop more over the next few weeks?
I do not. The reason is is because I traditionally open new accounts every 6 months anyway. And so I'm already suffering the maximum hit for having young accounts. Because now I play the, card bonus game, I play that now. Arbitrage. Yeah.
What is the percentage rate that you're getting on those?
It's probably ugly.
I will largely say beyond the scope, 10, 12%. They're comparable to hard money rates, if that's what you're really asking.
For a credit card, it's decent.
Yeah, they're a couple were credit cards, a couple were open lines of credit, unsecured. And no, I am not planning on doing anything crazy.
Oh, question.
Are you going to explain why you open or apply for new credit every 6 months or add new accounts?
Like I said, I mainly open new accounts in order to chase credit card bonuses. And then, so there's a lot of people that do this for the airline miles. I do it for hotel points because for my business, I travel all over the United States teaching seminars. And so I'm in hotels all the time. And I don't like paying for them. And so I pay for them with points for the most part from churning credit cards. That's why. So there's that. So I hope that the two stories, one the military dude and then my own story, is illustrative of what you can do. You'll notice that my scores didn't really start taking off until I got serious about fixing the problem, right? Once I got serious about it, they started to improve. Before I was serious about it, they weren't improving, okay? You have to be proactive. So the very first thing is to stop the bleeding. Part of the reason why I got into financial trouble is because I was spending money I didn't have on things I didn't need in order to impress people I didn't like. The old it's what we do in America. So my career change also, because when I went bankrupt, I had to make a complete career change. That's when I got into the tax world. I was not in the tax world before that. So in 2008, when I started in the tax profession, I started seeing other people's spending habits, and it had an impact on my own, okay? So in my role representing people with IRS debt, I saw the stupid crap they spent their money on, because part of what I have to do is analyze their bank statements. And I have to compare their living expenses to these things called the IRS collection financial standards, which are it's like the allowance that the IRS will let you have. And anything above that is theirs, okay? So, I got to see firsthand, and so I kind of became a budget counselor. And on the business side, helping businesses to reduce their overhead. It's kind of just a part of what I have to do. So I started seeing a lot of things and just kind of the negative side of things. So if you do not believe that compulsive buying disorder is a legitimate mental health condition, it's not recognized by the American Psychological Association, but it's a real problem, okay? So if you or somebody you know has a problem, there's 12-step programs, okay? Shopaholics Anonymous, Debtors Anonymous can help and give you access to other credit counseling resources if you need that. If you or someone you know has an issue with gambling, drugs, alcohol, those can obviously lead to spending issues as well, right? So I only mention this as like a public service announcement kind of thing. But start there if that's a problem that needs to be dealt with. Next thing is to critically examine your financial choices. Because the financial choices you make affect your debt load, and also, since we're talking about real estate investing, your debt to income ratio, okay? So a problem that I have with a lot of my tax clients is that because they don't pay their taxes, they live on 100% of their income instead of like 65% of their income. And so they have the car or the boat or the toy that they really can't afford because that's actually the government's money, okay, according to the government, okay? So a very common example of something that we'll have to do is the IRS may not care about a worthless boat. There's tons of boats around the Puget Sound area that are freaking worthless, okay? But the issue isn't the boat. The issue is the marina fee, okay? The $300, $400, $500 a month to park the boat. Or if somebody has an aircraft that's just a piece of junk, but they got to pay $300 a month for tie down or hangar space, okay? So when we're looking at the monthly budget, we get rid of the boat in order to get rid of the monthly expense, all right? And so a lot of people, when they're looking at their own budget, they forget about things like that, okay? So back when I used to own a Cessna 150, just parking it in Longmont was $250 a month, you know, and that was back when I was making like, you know, 2 cents an hour. It was just not doable. And my wife hated it. But that's a whole other story. Streaming services. Like, I know that this month there's like, what, 3, 4 new streaming services launching? Think about how many of those do you actually need, right? One of you mentioned you're doing house hacking. Was it you? Anybody else doing house hacking? Okay. So can you house hack, or can you become the roommate of a house hacker? Okay. I'm sure there's folks in this group that have rooms for rent if you need to reduce your cost of living. Review insurance policies. If you haven't shopped around for insurance in 5, 10 years, you're probably overpaying. Okay, and I'm talking life insurance, homeowners insurance, renter's insurance, car insurance, the whole gambit. Also, and some folks might disagree with me on this, if they're a financial planner in particular, but if you have to reduce your 401k contributions down to the absolute minimum to do nothing but get your company match, so that you have enough cash flow to pay off debt, like credit card debt, do it. Okay, it will put you in a much better position in the long term financially. Second thing, and you know, if you don't have, you know, if you're not spending your entire paycheck on Coke, or you're not leasing a Ferrari and doing, you know, things like that, probably one of the best tips I can give you is automate every payment you have. Okay, automate everything. Showed earlier, 35% of your FICO score is your payment history. The biggest impact on that is your most recent 24 months. Okay, if you've already saw the effect of the guy that stopped paying his mortgage. You know, 130, 140 point drop in just 2 months. There was a little irony in that, wasn't there? Your recent payment history can be impacted by like just forgetting stuff. Okay, I mean, I have like 24 credit cards because again, I'm playing the points game, right? Most of them just sit in a sock drawer, and I don't use them. I only carry 2. But if I forget to make a payment, then this score that I've spent years rebuilding is shot. And I rely on my credit score to con banks into giving me money to buy real estate. Okay? It's part of the game. What? It's kind of a con job. I mean, look at me. I went bankrupt, and these banks are giving me money. What is wrong with those people, right? So I'll tell you a short story here. One of the credit cards that I got a long time ago as part of my credit rebuilding was through a local credit union here called First Tech. I'm sure some of you are probably First Tech people. It's a card I never use. Except like once every 12 months, 18 months. And I use it, I'll take it out of the drawer once to use it just to keep it active so they don't disable the card, okay? And I'll talk about why that's important in a minute. So I had a friend, this was probably, I think May. I was taking her to dinner, and I was like, oh, I haven't used my First Tech card in a long time. I should use it just so they don't deactivate it. So I took it out of the drawer, and I took it, paid for dinner, came home, put it back in the drawer, forgot about it. This was one of my few cards I did not have on autopay. And also you should know, there is no way to call me. Like, I don't have a telephone that rings. I do have one of these things. I do not know the number for this device, and it's on Do Not Disturb 24/7. Okay, so they can't call me. Also, I don't really have like a real like primary residence. Long story. I live in a little mailbox in Rapid City, South Dakota. Okay, technically I'm a full-time RVer, and so I get my mail like every 6 weeks from the mail drop. And so when the notices are in there saying that you missed a payment, I'm not getting the calls. I never log into my First Tech accounts because it's not my primary banking thing. So I never log in. I had no idea that I missed this payment. Totally spaced it until I got my mail drop, and it was day like 58 towards the 60-day mark. I was already 30 days late. There were 2 letters in there. I panicked because I knew that if a 30-day late reported, my score would drop 40, 50, 60 points. In the higher interest rate that I'd be paying on loans in the future, it could potentially cost me tens of thousands of dollars in interest through my real estate activities. And I was like, so I panicked, okay? And so called them and paid it, obviously, plus a $25 extra donation to the credit union for it being late. And then I was talking to the customer service rep, and I'm like, I need this to not report to the credit bureaus, okay? And so this is the next tactic I want to tell you about. It's called a goodwill, or also called the pretty please defense. Basically, I begged, and I said, please do not report this to the credit bureau. Is there anybody I can talk to at the credit union to make sure this doesn't get reported? Can I donate $1,000 to your STEM scholarship fund so that this doesn't, like, what can I do? And so they had an internal process. They have a review team. And so she's typing away and sends it off to this review team. I get a letter a month later from the review team saying, you have a good history with us, and you've never, First Tech was the only financial institution that I did not screw over in my bankruptcy. They were the only one, okay? Every other financial institution you can think of that's a household name, I screwed them over, okay? But First Tech, I didn't. So, I didn't have a bad history at all with them. If it had been with another financial institution, they probably wouldn't have been as nice, given my past history, okay? The lesson there is automate all your minimum payments, okay? So that you never, ever, ever have a 30-day late. That's probably the number one thing I can tell you out of this entire presentation that impacts like the average person. Let's talk about utilization ratios. You're in a James Orr class, so I know you love talking about math. So utilization ratio is basically, it's just the ratio of debt to credit limits. That's all it is. So example, if I have $24,858 in credit card debt, but my total credit lines across all credit cards, my credit limit totals $85,000. My utilization ratio is 29.2%. Under the FICO 8 model, your utilization ratio is worth roughly 150 points total under the algorithm. And there are certain breakpoints when your utilization ratio goes below those breakpoints, you get points. So this is based again off nerd research on the MyFICO forums. People that have tried, figuring out how it works. And these are the breakpoints that have in aggregate been identified, okay? And FICO has wink, wink, nudge, nudge, sort of said, yeah, you guys are close, okay? The biggest score bump that you get is if your utilization ratio across all your credit cards and lines of credit is 8.9% or less. Okay? So the 9% mark, and then the next really awesome breakpoint comes at the 30% mark. Okay? One of the easiest ways, if you have a lot of credit card debt, but you have a good payment history and you have a good income, the easiest way to decrease your utilization ratio is to increase the denominator. So make the bottom number of the equation bigger. And so you do that simply by calling every creditor you have and ask for a credit line increase. Okay? You'd be amazed at some companies that hand them out like candy. Like Capital One and American Express are legendary for handing them out left and right. Okay? Other companies like Barclays and Citibank are pretty stingy with them.
Is the numerator the revolving amount that you keep on a monthly basis? Like if you pay it off every month, what's your numerator?
Well, if you pay it off every month, you have no balance, your numerator is 0. Yeah.
So it is revolving.
Yeah. And there's a caveat to that I'll get to here in a second, though.
So I'm curious on the credit utilization. I know you said it can swing your credit score 150 points. Does it have a history to it, right? So like, let's say this month I'm at 50%, but next month I pay it off completely. I guess what kind of lifetime does it have?
So that gets a little bit more complicated in trying to figure out and game the algorithm. From what I've been able to see in people's research doing this, you walked away with the mic. They do trend it, and I don't know what the rolling period. I don't know if it's like a rolling 3 months or rolling 6 months, but there does seem to be some rolling effect. But you can also have huge swings in your credit score. 20, 30, 40 points just from month to month based on this.
Right, and that's what I was going to say. Is I notice in mine that I'll vary just because of when payment dates particularly hit.
Yeah.
And it'll swing drastically.
Yep. And the lesson there is, right, if you're about to apply for a mortgage, make sure that you have everything at close to 0 except 1.
Does this affect why all 3 bureaus have a different score for you using the exact same algorithm? Because a bank will report to one bureau and not another?
Yeah. Yep. Or they might report at different days to the different bureaus, things like that. So what's also a sub-element of this utilization issue is the utilization on an individual credit line. A line of credit or a credit card. If you have one card that's maxed out, but your overall utilization ratio is still below like 9%, it actually can hurt you just as bad as having everything maxed out on a temporary basis. Okay, and the magic number here also seems to be 29%. So, for example, if you have an American Express card with a $15,000 credit limit, always keep it below $4,350. Okay? Basically, spread your balances is what this means. Okay? So the balance on any one particular card is less than 30%. Okay? And if you do that, and if you just do balance transfers and spread your debt, your score will actually go up sometimes 20, 30 points just from spreading it out. Okay? And doing nothing else. In terms of paying down debt, I don't know if there's still much of a stigma about bankruptcy. Maybe there is, maybe there isn't. I consider filing Chapter 7 bankruptcy the second best financial decision I ever made in my life. Okay.
Is that second to Nomad?
No. Nomad is probably third. Okay. First was joining the military, because I'm still benefiting from that. My first 2 Nomads were bought on VA loans, so I'm still benefiting. But yeah, don't ignore bankruptcy as an option. Okay. The bankruptcy law is there as a tool. There's no more debtor's prison. There hasn't been in 150 years or something. So if you're in such dire straits that you're contemplating bankruptcy, don't not contemplate it just because of whatever social stigma might exist. Okay, I openly talk about mine. I'm okay with it. Some people aren't, but it's really not as big of a deal as it used to be, I don't think. And when it comes to real estate investing, and Matt, correct me if I screwed any of these up, but it's my understanding that on a Chapter 7, there is a minimum of a 2-year wait between your discharge date and when you can get a VA or FHA loan. Okay.
Matt is nodding yes.
Matt is nodding yes. If you're doing a conforming loan, it's a 4-year wait period. If you have a Chapter 13 bankruptcy where you're making payments, then you can actually get an FHA or VA loan while you're still in bankruptcy, as long as you've been making your bankruptcy payments for 1 year. Okay, as crazy as that sounds. If you have not made a year of payments, then you got to wait 2 years. And then if the judge dismisses your 13 case, then you're at the 4-year mark. Okay. So James, what percentage of people do you think do FHA or VA for their first nomad?
It's relatively small.
Oh, is it?
And
Okay.
I would imagine
Okay.
in certain cities where you have a higher concentration of VA, you'd see a significant increase. But around here, there's no military base except for Wyoming or pretty far south. So we're not seeing a lot of VA.
Okay, fair enough. And I don't know what the rules are on USDA. I would imagine they're similar.
Yeah, they're close to FHA.
Close? Okay. So if you have a bankruptcy, don't think that you can't start doing nomad. You can, okay, relatively quickly. I wish that I had known this in 2010, okay? I wish that I had known that, and I wish I'd known about nomad. If you have state or IRS tax debts, I mention this just because it's always on my mind, you can have a tax debt and still get a mortgage, okay? Each loan underwriter is different, but what I recommend is that if you have a liability with the state or the IRS, deal with it, get on an installment agreement, payment plan, and then include that monthly payment in just with your, on the 1003, your loan application, it just goes into your debt to income ratio, okay? And if you can still qualify with that payment, great, okay? Depending on the underwriter, the loan guarantor, and if you have what's called a notice of federal tax lien or a state tax lien, the actual document filed on county record against you, you may need to go through a process of getting that withdrawn. Okay? And every state has a process, the IRS has a process to get that withdrawn to help you buy a house. Okay? Review your credit reports. I already told you about some of the things I found on mine that were either not my debt or that were coded improperly. And once I got them coded properly, like that one thing I coded properly resulted in like a 13, 15 point bump just from that one credit report item. You can remove inaccurate info, and you can negotiate with your creditors to have things straight up deleted. Okay? I ended up doing that with the Verizon account that was not mine. I did the pay for delete. I also did it with that $4,350 on the truck that I didn't have the gap insurance for. What I ended up doing in 2014 is I was preparing, knowing I was going to get back into real estate investing. I was like, I need that gone because it was the biggest black mark on my credit report. And so I negotiated with Capital One. I paid them, I don't remember the exact, I think it was like $2,800 or something like that. I mean, I owed that money, right? That was legit. I owed it. So I paid him that. I had the full amount. I was not broke at that point anymore. I could have paid the whole thing. I just didn't want to. So I negotiated with him, gave him like $2,800-ish in exchange for deleting it entirely from my credit reports. And so in one fell swoop, boom, it was gone. Okay. So don't think that you can't negotiate with creditors after it's been charged off. Okay. The laws beyond that, why it's beneficial to them, are beyond the scope, but it actually behooves them to settle charged off debt. okay, under certain banking laws. Other big thing I'll mention that was interesting to me was when I learned, you all know that the 7-year mark, things have to be deleted, right? It's part of the Fair Credit Reporting Act. What I didn't know until actually 2014 was when that 7-year clock starts ticking, okay? That 7-year clock starts ticking on what's called the date of first delinquency, DOFD. The date of first delinquency is the first time that it's reported to the credit bureaus that you're 30 days late. Okay? So no matter what else you do in the future, it's that date of first delinquency that matters more than anything else. So because I stopped paying most of my bills in early 07, even the 120-day lates on my federal student loans that I wasn't able to discharge in bankruptcy, by the time 2014 rolled around, the date of first delinquency was 7 years ago and they fell off. Okay? So, and if they don't fall off, then you open a dispute online and say, hey, 7 years, Fair Credit Reporting Act, suck it. And it should go away. Okay? I talked about pay for delete. Pay for delete is a tool that you use against charge-offs and collection accounts. Okay? You're getting some exercise tonight.
Yeah, that's why I didn't go to the gym today.
Ah. I didn't go to the gym because I'm lazy.
I didn't go to the gym because it's cold. Let's say you are 7 years past, but that has gone to a credit agency and perhaps now it's being sold on whatever market that these are. And they're still trying to contact you. Then, and let's say we contacted Verizon, in our case it's Sprint, bastards. And they don't want to talk to you.
Sure, because it's been assigned to a collection agency.
Correct.
Right.
They've already sold it off for pennies on the dollar. Now the credit agency is trying to get you on it, but you don't trust them because of the nature of the of who they are.
The 7-year rule applies to the original creditor.
To the original creditor. So I can tell, so I don't even, I can just go directly to...
That's why I went straight to Verizon. I skipped the collection agency. I was like, I'm not talking to you people.
Okay.
Yeah.
So I just need to be persistent with Sprint.
Yeah. It's time consuming, it's aggravating, it's frustrating, but it is what it is.
Okay. So I programmed something to just call them every 15 minutes until they answer.
Oh, if you're that type of person, great, go for it. Yeah. Write your own auto dialer software or something, I don't know.
And so that's the pay for delete though that you're speaking about. So like you contacted Verizon, offered the pay for delete.
Correct.
Okay. Okay.
Yeah, that was a PFD. Yeah. There's the courtesy removal. That's what I did with First Tech this year because I screwed up. And I'm like, please don't report this. Sometimes there are people on the FICO forums that have sent literally hundreds of letters, to their creditors saying, pretty please, pretty please, pretty please, pretty please, pretty please. They do it every month. They do it for years until that bank or whatever finally says, good grief, we'll delete it just so you leave us alone.
You know, if they took all the money they spent on postage and just paid their bills, it might actually be helpful. Just saying.
Okay, so that's courtesy removal. These you do directly with the creditor, okay, directly with the creditor. Debt validation is a tool that you work with the credit bureau on. Again, by law, the credit reports have to be accurate. If they're not accurate, you have a right to have information removed. And so it is theoretically the responsibility of the credit bureau to make sure that your credit reports are accurate. Okay? So if you point out something to them, I know half of you are laughing, but if you point out something to them that is not accurate, what they are required to do is contact the creditor and ask the creditor for proof of the validity of the debt. And if the credit bureau does not get that proof, the bureau is supposed to remove it from your credit reports.
Back to my scenario. So 7 years have passed. Can now I go directly to the credit bureau and tell them this is 7 years has passed, I don't want to go through this headache?
Yes.
Thank you.
Yeah. The other thing you need to be aware of, and it applies, it sounds like to your situation, is every state has a legal statute of limitations on the ability to collect on a debt. Okay. In Colorado, it's 6 years. So if anybody's listening on the podcast that's not in Colorado, check with your state. There's some states out there that are like 20 years. But here it's 6 years. Once a debt is 6 years old, they can't, under state law, they can't come after you for it. They can still report it on your credit report until that 7-year mark, but they can't like sue you in state court to try to get a judgment against you once you're past the 6-year mark. Okay, that's Colorado. Oh, sorry.
That's okay. Is there anything that you can do if you, like you did with that First Tech card, if you haven't used an old account and it closed? Like, is there anything you can do about that, or are you just?
So if a bank decides to close a credit line because you're not using it, or think about why they do it. They're not making any money off you, right? So that's why. But it hurts you because it impacts your average age of accounts, and it can decrease your credit limits. So your utilization ratio is now hosed. So in those cases, it's a pretty please. Is all it is. Yeah, and there's some credit card companies that are much more notorious for doing that than others. Like the worst one is Barclays. They don't like their customers using other credit cards for some reason, and so they're notorious for closing customers' accounts. But yeah. By the way, this is also part of the reason why I open new credit lines all the time. Is because I know it's never happened to me, but eventually someone's going to do that to me. So, okay. Some people will say that you should do everything over the phone. I hate the telephone. I hate it, hate it, hate it, hate it. And so I'm the kind of person that I prefer doing everything either online, if I possibly can, or through the mail. Okay. If you're doing stuff through the mail, use certified mail return receipt so you get that green card back showing when you sent it. It can get expensive if you're doing like a lot of these, so your budget may have something to be said there. But I have had very good luck with the online dispute process with the credit bureaus. I've had really good luck with it. Whereas other people say that it sucks and they never win. But it's how I cleaned up most of my credit reports over the years, is through the online process. I've had good luck with it. And then also make sure that you are not just monitoring your score, but also the actual credit reports. Look at your credit reports every few months. Credit rebuilding. Biggest tip I can give you here is do not reaccumulate debt once you pay down debt. There are people that go through Chapter 7 bankruptcy. They flush hundreds of thousands, if not millions of dollars in debt. 2 years later, they're 50 grand in credit card debt again. Okay? Don't do that. You don't have to take on debt in order to raise your credit score. What you need is credit limits, not debt. Make sure you have an emergency fund. I figure with this group that probably goes without saying. There was this infamous study that came out last year that everybody's tired of hearing about that said that 58% of Americans cannot afford a $400 emergency. Okay, I've been there, done that. It was not fun. I don't recommend homelessness. So there you go. Do I need to give a pitch for not being homeless? No? All right, we're good. All right. If you're rebuilding your credit, credit unions are your best friend. So around here, First Tech, I love. Elevations, I just connected with them. Canvas used to be, was it the Public Service Credit Union. ENT is also around here. I don't know what their specialty is. Anybody can join NASA Federal Credit Union, which I know sounds weird, but they have a foundation. If you make a donation to the foundation for like space education, you can join the credit union.
I thought you had to live in this universe in order to join NASA.
You do.
Okay.
But NASA FCU has some pretty good programs if you don't like your local options. If you are a veteran, your grandparents, relatives by marriage or anything are military, even if they're deceased, you can join Navy Federal Credit Union. I burned them hardcore in my bankruptcy. I asked them a couple years ago, can I come back? I am not allowed to ever be a Navy Federal Credit Union member ever again. Penn Feds are also good. You can also join Penn Fed by making like a $25 donation to Wounded Warrior Foundation or something like that. So you can kind of backdoor those. Well, that's how I did Elevations too, because technically I don't live here. I made a like $15 donation to the Elevations Colorado something foundation to get my membership so I could apply for a mortgage. So yeah, so credit unions are your best friend. And the reason why is because a lot of the secured credit rebuilder cards out there are from these like really kind of scummy fly-by-night banks. For the recording, should I not name them?
Yes, please do not name
Okay. So some of these banks that you see here,
You listed them out.
when I was rebuilding my credit, I had one of those, I had one of those, and I had one of those. A lot of these, what you do is you send them $200 or $300 cash, okay? So like this one, I sent them $200 cash. They gave me a $200 credit line, that's a secured card, and then they charged me a $150 annual fee. So my actual credit line was $50, okay? Ignore those, don't use those. This one is decent, but I highly recommend that you start with your credit union and then also the two like big commercial banks that are the friendliest towards credit rebuilding are Capital One and Discover.
What are the other pros of having a credit union besides a secured credit card?
What are the other pros to a credit union?
Yeah.
I mean, this slide? I'll get there.
Thank you so much. Sorry.
I highly recommend avoid store cards, like department store cards and whatnot. There's some issues in how they report to the bureaus that can hurt you later on. They can actually drag your score down, even if you don't have that many of them. Also, there are some companies out there. This is the most common one. I think that Amazon has an affiliation to offer a credit line through another bank I won't mention. Don't take that offer either if you're doing credit rebuilding, because they're wonky and the fees are insane, okay? If you are trying to do credit rebuilding and you already have open accounts, don't close old accounts, because the shorter your average account open history is, the lower your score will go, okay? Your score benefits from having accounts open for a long time, okay? Even if there was a point in time where your payment history on that card sucked, okay? Having the account stay open will boost your score in later years. That's why I said earlier the Capital One card, I don't use it anymore. The account is actually locked. I pay the $59 annual fee to keep the card open because it's my oldest credit card, okay? And it helps boost my score. Maybe in another couple years, I'll finally close it. But for now, I keep it open because it's my oldest card. So the factors to look at are your average age of accounts. So across your entire credit portfolio, the average age of all accounts. That includes mortgages, by the way. It's not just credit cards and lines of credit, okay? It's all open credit lines. So you get points for longevity there. You get points for your single oldest account. Okay. You also get dinged for having really young accounts up to a certain point. So I said earlier, I open new accounts basically every 6 months. I just opened several yesterday. But my score is already, I've already taken the hit. And so I probably won't get a further hit for having younger accounts open. My hit was from all the inquiries that's where my hit came from yesterday. Okay.
You have 15 minutes.
I know. Any questions on age of accounts? I know several of you asked about that. Brian? Uh-oh. Am I about to get a whammo question?
You just mentioned store cards. I'm just curious, can you go into like 60 seconds of why store cards are worse than normal cards or why they might be?
So there is anecdotal evidence. Again, FICO won't say yay or nay, but there's anecdotal evidence that store cards are treated as like, third tier compared to regular credit cards. And so because I showed you the chart earlier, your benefit from credit cards maxes at 3. So you only have like 3 slots of benefit. And so if you have store cards taking that up, it hurts you. Does that make sense?
Sure, but if you have beyond 4 cards anyway, store cards are really not going to do anything
probably.
worse.
But in a credit rebuilding,
right. Yeah.
One of the things I'm not talking about here tonight, because we'd be here all night, is I'm not talking about scoring buckets. There are different ways that are different, depending on the most egregious thing that's happened to you. You're placed in like one of 9 buckets where there's a slightly different scoring model even within the FICO 8 or FICO 9 or whatever, okay? So once I bumped from the bankruptcy bucket to the not bankruptcy bucket, I was judged differently even with the same things the day before and the day after, okay? So buckets and store cards have a relationship. Okay. Get a secured card. After you've had it for 6 months or so, ask for an upgrade to a regular unsecured credit card. Depending on how low your scores were when you started, you may need to wait 12 months, okay? Because I started so low at 380, I was a 12-month waiter, okay, before I had like a real credit card. And then the next month, they give me a car loan. I already talked about the 3. Many credit rebuilders end up with, this is what they end up with, okay? It's the most common. It's the Discover It Chrome card, the Capital One Quicksilver, because both of the Capital One and Discover will start you with a secured card and then graduate you to an unsecured card, usually after 6 to 12 months. And then don't forget your credit card, your credit reports. Credit reporting tip. Again, anecdotal evidence suggests that the maximum score comes when you have all of your credit cards paid off except one. And on that one, your utilization across all cards is less than 9%, but on that one card you have at least $2. At least $2, okay? So here's what I do. I pay off all my credit cards every Monday. It's Money Monday, it's just what I do. It's when I check my scores, do all my financial crap. But I have one card that has one function in my entire credit portfolio. It has one natural gas bill from a property that gets charged to it. It's usually 20 to 30 bucks a month is all that it is. Minimum payment on that card every month is $15. So it usually, after the minimum payment, auto payment goes through, I have a balance of 5 or 10 bucks. And I never touch that card otherwise. I pay probably $10 a year in interest because of minimum interest charges on that card, but it's worth it because I always have something that reports a balance, a tiny balance, because then it shows I'm using my credit. If your balances are always absolutely zero, it will actually hurt you. Because credit scoring, they want you to be using your credit. Okay? After you have 3 credit cards, next thing, go back to the credit union, okay? And get what is called a share secured loan. Some credit unions will call it a certificate secured loan. But you put money on deposit in your account. In the basic account, the one that has to be at least $5, that account, you put a couple $100 in there, $500, and then you take out a $500 loan. Okay? A lot of times those loans will be 12 to 24 months. What you should do is make regular payments on it for 6 months. minimum. Okay. After the 6 months, you've gotten quite a bit of the boost from it to your credit reporting. Pay off all but about 9% of it. Okay, see what we're doing? We're getting down to that 9%, but leaving a balance on it and still make payments on it. If you already have a student loan, car loan, mortgage, something like that, this little trick won't help you. But if you're completely starting over from scratch, this is a great thing to do after you have the credit cards, because remember that little bit about the credit mix, the types of credit you have? Well, you've got 3 revolving lines. This is called an installment line. Okay? And so now you have 2 different types of credit that you're using. They like to see that, your score will go up. After you've done this, do another bigger such loan with either the same credit union or try to get a small unsecured loan. A lot of the big commercial banks will give people a $2,000, $3,000 unsecured loan over like a 5-6 year term. Keep it open for a year or 2, play the game, pay the interest. You're buying score points is what you're doing when you're paying that interest. Then what you do, you wait. The rest of credit rebuilding, for the most part, is waiting for stuff to fall off, hit that 7-year mark, and fall off. It's waiting until you get to the 24-month point where you have a good, solid, clean payment history. If you're post-bankruptcy, maybe you are finally starting to look at mortgages, and you can talk to a loan officer and be there. But figure on it being about a 24-month adventure. Okay? So, how does credit score impact interest rates and ROI? And this is the part of the class that James probably would have preferred I spend an hour on. Because this is where we get to his charts, because he loves his charts. So Matt was gracious enough to supply a ton of rate information for different scenarios. So first we're going to look at 20% down owner-occupant. Okay. So these are the different rates, and these were as of early last week?
It was about a week ago.
About a week ago? Okay. Notice the spread in interest rate. 620 to 640 credit score, 5%. And this is with no points, by the way, so we're not buying down the rate. Whereas somebody with a great credit score, 3875.
3.75 actually for 740 plus.
Oh yeah, you didn't highlight that. Okay. So James made these. Obviously.
It's a good thing we're off mic for that.
The most interesting thing to me here was on the cash flow part. Because you get a lower payment with a lower interest rate, right? And so the cash flow is going to be better, right? And so the bars on the far left are the good credit scores. Credit scores go to crap as you go to the right. And you were doing a $375,000 house. So this is your stereotypical new construction, local nomad kind of property. Cash flow over the course of a year with great credit, about $3,000. With poorer credit, $363.
Per year. And
per year.
This is 20% down.
With 20% down. Huge difference.
So go back a slide for a second. So there are 2 things that vary depending on...
I'll just give you the clicker.
There are 2 things that vary depending on your interest rate. It's going to be cash flow and debt pay down. Debt pay down varies because the interest rate matters as to how much of the loan you pay down in that first year. So the difference between somebody with great credit is $23,000 and change for the year versus about $19,000 and change. So it's almost a $4,000 difference depending on your credit score for a 20% down investment property in year 1.
And from a percentage standpoint, that's close to, it's almost 5% difference between the 2.
Yeah, closer to 4, but yes.
Okay. 10% down, owner-occupant, with PMI. So low credit score, 5.25 rate. Good credit score, 3.75. Huge spread. On some of these charts, James forgot to put the labels, so I did. So again, 10% down. 10.
I agree. Where is the quality control?
10% down. 10% down with PMI. Okay, this is the cool part. With PMI, look at the freaking difference. Your cash flow is negative for the year, but $11 negative versus $5,800 negative. Wow. That's the difference across 1 year from a 620 to a 740 credit score. Okay.
You should make James proud, and you should trademark that.
What? Appreciation? I'm sure you have something to comment besides my labels.
Yeah, so the big difference for the year, when you calculate both cash flow and debt pay, those are the only two that vary. It go from almost $21,000 for the year to high $13,000. So it's like whatever that is, $7,000, almost $8,000.
Yeah, it's almost $8,000 when you include debt pay down.
That's a pretty big difference.
Yeah, 17% delta.
And this is 1 year. So when Jason was making the joke that the $45 dinner almost cost him tens of thousands of dollars, this is like 1 year, one property's difference.
Yeah. I mean, if it's $8,000 a year on one property, multiply by however long you're going to do Nomad, it adds up. This is your 5% down owner-occ with PMI. Interest rates ranging, again, 5.25 down to 3.75. I mean, look at that. That's insane, right? You go from, with a good credit score, negative $1,300 a year cash flow, but with the worst credit score, negative $8,300 a year.
Yeah, this is typical Nomad. 5% down, owner-occupant, if you could rent it in year one, which you can't, and monthly PMI. So the difference is $20,000 versus $11,500. So that's like $8,500 difference based on credit score.
Yeah, and I like looking at the percentages. I mean, it is a almost 25% difference in total.
It is 35%
35,
difference.
sorry.
You go from 80 in your best case scenario, 80% return in year one to a 45.9%. So it's like 35%, 34%.
Just from your credit score. What about non-owner-occ? So investor loan, 20% down. We're talking about higher interest rates. So we're looking, the spread is tighter, 5.875 down to about 5.375. But it still makes a difference. Here it's, what is that, $2,000, $1,500, something like that. So even when you're doing 20% down non-owner-occ, your credit score still makes a difference, even though you already know that the interest rate's going to be higher, right? It still makes a difference what your credit score is.
Go back one slide quick. So the difference in percentage is almost 2% return on investment in year one. Non-owner occupant, 20% down depending on your credit score.
And how many of you, when you look at like your savings and other investments, you're clawing for an extra 2% return, right? I know I am.
The other point here is that you only go down to 680, right? So we're not dropping all the way down. So the change here is not as great because we're not going down to a 620 to 640.
Right. Are you going to get an investor loan with a 580 credit score?
No.
No.
Right. I'm just making the point that there's missing bars, right?
Right.
Would show a much bigger thing. So if you're looking at this going, oh, it's not as bad on this, it still is. Yeah,
right.
It's zero.
Well, yeah, I guess that's a good point. You're not going to be doing investor loans with really bad credit. It's not going to be an option, really.
I think, Matt, correct me if I'm wrong, but that was the lowest we could have gone, right? You checked? Yes, that was the lowest you could have gone.
So the 680 was the lowest.
680 credit score was the lowest with 20% down. Oh, questions?
Does it help to go higher? Does it help to go higher than a credit score of 740?
Not on interest rate, but your PMI goes, it adjusts up to 760, and then 760 is the perfect.
But there's no PMI on non-owner occupants. 20% down. There's no PMI on that. What was the other question? Is that you?
Sort of the same
Wait.
Wait. So for owner-occ, as long as you're above 740, you can't do any better.
Not on interest rate.
Anything else?
PMI 760. Yeah, PMI 760.
But for investor. 20% down.
Yeah, no, that's 740 is the best of the best.
Okay.
So huge difference. Some things, if you're just getting started in real estate investing, understand that when you start taking on mortgages, your score will drop. I showed you earlier when I took on my first mortgage, my first Nomad property, my score dropped 40 points, and it stayed there for like 3 months before it recovered. Okay. The part of this has to do with utilization, but a different utilization ratio related to your installment loans. As I pay off my mortgages, my credit score will naturally go up if I don't take on any more debt. Okay. Understand that you're always going to have inquiries. And, going back to what you just said, 740 is good enough, right? There's no need for you to get locked into chasing the almighty 850. There are, again, nerds that they want to do that. And I was one of them for the past couple of years. I got up to like 820, was it 825, 830, something like that. But then it's a tool, okay? And if I wasn't using the tool, then I would be a tool. And so...
And for those listening after the fact, realize that you should check with your lender to find out what the newest kind of top score is, because this may change. This is the current state of where things are, but it could be different a month from now, or 6 months from now, a year from now, whatever it is.
Yeah. This is just a security thing. In between loans, I recommend putting freezes on your credit reports. There's the places to go. You can just Google it. I also recommend, if you've had any issues whatsoever with identity theft or fraudulent accounts like I have, talk to the credit bureaus and request what's called an extended fraud alert. It is a 7-year fraud alert where theoretically, when you apply for credit, they're supposed to take extra measures to verify your identity. The bank is, okay? If that EFA is long on there. Somebody had a question?
The only question I was going to ask is, could we take a picture of that?
Just from my personal experience, I did have identity theft. I've got the 7-year fraud alert on there.
Good.
And I still got another identity theft with that on there. They were not treating...
That's why I said
It's up to
theoretically.
each individual company whether they want to pursue that fraud alert,
Right.
and they weren't. And my account was still... My report was still getting hit with what do they call that? Those pre-credit...
pre-approved offers.
Pre-approved
Yeah.
offers. And those were getting stolen in the mail. So I agree with you. You say the best thing to do is freeze your account. Freeze your
Not
account.
just lock, by the way. There's lock and there's freeze.
Freeze.
You want to freeze, not just do the lock. Accessibility. The freeze is basically absolutely undoable. Again, FICOforums.myfico.com. They helped me on my decade-long journey to 800 and being able to nomad. And so, great resource that I recommend. Bryce?
You might have said this, I don't know. For freezing and unfreezing, is there a cost to doing so?
So there used to be varying costs, but there have been legislative action to remove those costs. Okay. So this should all be free now. My first few nomads, I was paying like 10 or 20 bucks for each lock and unlock.
Yeah.
But it was worth it because I'd been through the identity theft thing already.
Yeah, because I pay monthly for like Identity Force, which is like LifeLock, but not owned by Equifax. But the reason I had that was because I thought I was going to have to pay every time, and I do the same thing where I'm getting new cards every few months and mortgages, and it sounded horrible.
It is a pain in the ass to be freezing and unfreezing your credit all the time. But when you do an unfreeze for a credit application, you can do a temporary unfreeze and put a date in there. And so what I do, if I'm applying for a mortgage, I expect that they're going to do a last-minute hard pull the day before closing to make sure I didn't accumulate new debt. They don't always do it. Sometimes they do, sometimes they don't. And so I will unfreeze through my expected closing date. That's what I do.
So the fees are state by state because they're driven by laws.
Yeah.
And Colorado, I think, has been a free state for a long time.
Going back to the very beginning, what number of cards did you say was a safe amount of number of cards to have?
3.
3.
That's the apparent magic number. Okay. If you're going through credit rebuilding and you're in that bucket, once you're in the good credit bucket, it pretty much doesn't matter. Like I said, I got probably 2 dozen cards. Yeah.
So if your credit is frozen with all 3 agencies, can you pull a credit report then?
Theoretically, no.
Okay.
I say theoretically.
Okay.
What happens if somebody applies for credit, even you, is they shouldn't be able to pull the credit report. They won't be able to give you a credit decision.
Okay.
Yeah.
I've successfully gotten a credit report with a freeze on my accounts. Yeah.
That's why, again, that's why I said theoretically.
I get it myself. Yeah.
Yeah. So I hope this was helpful.
Yeah.
Are we still recording? Go ahead.
So at the beginning of class tonight, everybody said that you guys are checking your credit daily, hourly, monthly. Is that, are you paying for that? Are you?
A lot of, so like, again, I have 2 dozen credit cards. I've got several of them that give me free FICO scores just whenever I log in. And that's how I track it these days. Because I'm no longer in rebuild mode, I'm just in maintenance mode. I don't pay for, credit monitoring anymore. Plus, I've been through identity theft 3 times and have suffered enough data breaches that I have free credit monitoring from several providers, so.
I was actually one of the people that says that I check it monthly, and now after the class, I understand that I don't. I actually check my FICO score monthly. I haven't seen an actual copy of my credit report since at least the end of last year. It's been right at a year since I've seen a full copy.
I read my credit reports every single month. Okay.
So, I mean, if you're really concerned about it, do what Royce does.
Yeah.
Right?
Yeah.
I mean, like, if you don't have credit monitoring already from Equifax or Primera or whoever else, right? I mean, I have like 2 years and 2 years.
Yep,
and 2
same here.
years. Like, someday I might need to pay for it, but like, I get notified if anything hits my credit report.
Yep.
Which is why I don't need to sit around looking at my
Correct.
credit report or my credit score. I still pull one every 4 months from the end of the credit report. Sometimes I forget and then I just pull them all.
Right.
And then a year later pull them all again just to verify. But that's about the extent of what I think is necessary.
Yep.
Unless you're like really trying to ramp up and hit something and
Right.
you're trying to make it, I'm at 7:30.
Yeah, don't obsess. Yeah, there's no reason to obsess. No.
So am I.
Are you still recording?
Just a question. Have you ever heard of the tactic of like authorized user on a credit person? Does that
Yeah,
typically work?
it does. The reason I didn't talk about it during the class is because it's been my experience that once you've demonstrated poor financial decision making, family doesn't want to put you as an authorized user on their credit cards. If you do have someone that's willing to do that, great. It does help. It's just that a lot of people have a hard time finding somebody that'll actually do it.
So she asked, who do I use? I use ID Notify because that's what happened. Royce uses Identity Force. Identity Force. Do you have a preferred?
I use the Experian Credit Watch product.
Sure. Royce has something too. Joe.
It was going to be more a smart ass comment. I was going to say, I don't have Twitter, so I have a bunch of tax questions for you.
It was a trick I was taught years ago. What you owe on a credit card is reported the date your statement cuts off. And then if you set them up for auto pay on the due date, set up your auto pay for the day before your statement
Yeah.
cuts off, and then it reports
Yeah. Yep.
much less. Simple trick.
I like doing it manually. I like seeing all my financial stuff. That's why I do Money Mondays. That's when I do my investment stuff. That's when I do credit stuff, whole 9 yards. Wait, you're making me get exercise? What's up with that?
So I know what's going on here, but I figured you could comment probably more in depth. Like you see the ads and they're like, "Oh, boost your credit score by X number of points." And I've seen some lenders actually use this tactic to get a better credit score. But comment on that.
So credit repair companies, I almost said credit repair scams. Well, most of them are. So here's how most of them work. Most of them do the debt validation technique that I talked about, but they do it even on legitimate things that are reporting. And so what a lot of these companies do when you hire them, you pay them, a couple $1,000s or something like that, and they use the power of attorney that you sign to give them access to do this on your behalf. And then they go and dispute every single thing on every single credit report through the online portals, even the valid stuff. That's what they do, for the most part. And you pay them, a ton of money for the privilege. Most folks that I know that need the credit repair help don't, and it's a financial burden for them to pay the couple grand fee for something that they can do themselves. Plus, if you DV everything, the credit bureaus can come back on you about it. People have been sued for doing this, okay? Because again, your credit reports are supposed to be accurate, but if you're disputing things that are accurate, it's actually you that's wasting their resources. So I don't recommend using those kind of services.
Following up on what Denise had said earlier, I haven't done this. I really should try, but I assume you can change your end of state or your statement close date on any of the cards and stuff you have, right?
Yeah, I try to align mine all on the first of the month.
Yeah, every time I go to reconcile statements in QuickBooks every month, I'm like, why do I have these spread all across the month?
Yeah. Do we normally go over when you do these classes? Oh, all right.
James just doesn't teach the second half of his class.
That is true.
Sorry.
Sounds like our podcast.
That's a really cool podcast.
This is extremely informative.
All right, thank you all for coming. We will all see you later.